Hi everyone, I'm going to go ahead and cover the few slides that we didn't get to last week. So if you recall, we talked a lot about pre-referral strategies, and then we shifted briefly into talking about the MDT team, but we did not cover parental participation. So I do want to go over a few of those slides. So we're to the point where the child's been through multiple tiers of interventions and we're still not seeing any progress. So the school or the parents have made a formal referral for a suspected disability. So if we believe that exists, a formal referral is made to the MDT. So with this process, we have something called due process, and those are just essentially rights that are from the federal government for different people involved in the process. So of course the parents, and they will receive a copy of the due process rights and regulations. Essentially, it's like a big packet of paperwork. We offer that annually to the parents. Typically they only take it that one time, but you do have to offer this. So if you're attending an IEP conference, you should see the special ed teacher ask or offer the due process rights to the parents. Also involved in the rights to due process is the classroom teacher, a professional staff member, judicial officers, the student if they're older than 18, and the chief school officer. Now, when we're looking at the contents of the referral, so the first thing that we have to have, and we briefly discussed this, is we have to have permission from the parent. So we have the signed formal referral, and that begins the process. So essentially it outlines, we suspect your child has this disability. We will do a formal evaluation, and here's our timeline. This is exactly what's going to happen. And then the parent would sign off saying, yes, I agree, or they're going to say, no, I do not agree. So that formal referral should be written and dated, and that makes it the official timeline. If the referral is not from the parents, the school district must inform the parents in writing. And so here we have a quote is, an important point to remember is that the referral to the MDT does not mean the child has a disability. It just signals that the child is having learning and or behavioral difficulties, and that it might be because of a disability. So recall the timeline. This is an important date, is that you have 10 days from that initial request to have a formal evaluation. So if I am the mother and I am making a request to the school to have my child evaluated for a disability, the school district has 10 school days to tell me, yes, we're going to do a formal evaluation, or no, and this is why. Okay, so that's a 10-day timeline. Now, the MDT team is going to look at different assessment options, and really the point in doing this is to know which assessments to give. So you can see here, I'm not going to go over this word for word, but I do encourage you to look at the presentation notes. So these are broken down into different essential categories. So academic achievement evaluation is first. That's examining academic skill levels, and it determines strengths and weaknesses. This, of course, would absolutely be used for specific learning disabilities. Next is intellectual and psychological evaluations. So this is appropriate when the child's intellectual ability is unknown, or when there is a question about his or her inability to learn. So if we're looking at an intellectual disability, also we could be with the learning disability, with EBD, with autism, just to name a few. Perceptual evaluations is when the team thinks that there's discrepancies in the child's ability to receive and process information. The speech and language evaluation has to do with if the child is experiencing significant delays in their speech or language development. This could include problems with articulation or with receptive or expressive language. An OT evaluation is any issues with fine motor or upper body functioning. PT evaluation is with like lower body and those gross motor movements. So those are just a few different areas in which we would have separate assessments for each area. So parental participation, that's really crucial. You want to have families involved. That's not always the case where they want to be involved, but you should make every effort to involve them. So one thing that's mandatory by law, so by IDEA, is parent intake. And what that is it's the gathering of important information that's relevant to the process. So it's going to give us this overview and really paint this picture of the child's academic, social, emotional, and family history. The goals with the parent intake are 1, identify data and family information. 2 is to look at their developmental history. So we're really trying to see if there was any trends in their development. If you go back to thinking about childhood development, we know children should hit milestones at certain points. So this is going to help us zone in on those type of questions. Also asking parents about the child's academic history and their social history. So these are all really important in painting the picture of the child. So I'm going to end chapter 7 with this quote. It is very important to remember that referring a child for a suspected disability could have tremendous impact on his or her life. Because this is a formal referral for special ed, it has legal implications, and therefore it's extremely important that the MDT follow all procedures, complete all necessary forms, and make sure that it complies with the specific time limits required by the state in which the child resides. Okay, so just really, really important that you're following the law, IDEA, on everything that has to do with the evaluation. So we're going to shift into chapter 8. We're going to continue to talk about parent consent and evaluation standards under IDEA. Our topics here are parent consent and the evaluation process, so we'll look at timelines and the standards for evaluation. The learning objectives for this portion of the lecture are to define parental consent, explain the criteria for parental consent, and list the 6 evaluation standards under IDEIA. So we have evaluation. So when we think about evaluation, it's the procedures used to determine whether a child has a disability and the nature and extent of special education and related services that the child needs. So in whole, we're looking at their whole special ed program and making decisions. The request, like I said earlier, can be made by the parent or the school. Irregardless, you have to have parent consent. So evaluations must be individualized. So every single evaluation is individualized. We're not going to use the same standard for every single student. And then it's not a general assessment that's used for all students. So like I said before, when we're zoning in on different areas of needs, that's going to tell us our assessments that we need to use. So the parent consent must be in writing, and this grants us permission to assess a child for a possible disability. And it starts that timeline. So 3 criteria for parental consent. So number 1, we want to make sure that the parent has been fully informed of all information pertaining to the activity. So number 1, we need to provide this in their native language and in their mode of communication. If we have a parent come in who is illiterate, we need to make sure that we are sitting down and talking through this with them, not just giving them a form and telling them to sign it. We want to make sure that parents understand and agree in writing to the activity. And we also want them to know that this is completely voluntary and can be revoked at any time. So as we look at this time frame for an initial evaluation, so initial evaluations must be conducted within 60 days of receiving parental consent. So we have a 60-day timeline, and like I've said before, that's 60 school days. So under our federal law that governs special education, we have 6 evaluation standards. Okay, and so here they are listed here, and we'll go more in depth to each one. So they must be met in order for an evaluation of a child with a possible disability. So number 1, we know that they need to be conducted by the MDT. They need to not be racially or culturally discriminatory. They need to be valid and reliable, administered by trained personnel. No single procedure can be used as the sole criterion, and all tests must be given in the child's native language. So that first criteria is it's conducted by the MDT. So on this team, these individuals are trained and knowledgeable in their specific areas. They will be performing the evaluation of the child for the possible disability and making recommendations to the eligibility committee. These members can include the general ed teacher, the special ed teacher, a school psychologist, social worker, education evaluator, school or guidance counselor, an SLP, parent, medical personnel, school nurse, an OT, or a PT, just to name a few. Our second criteria is that we need to make sure that we are not discriminating based on race or culture. So material should not present a problem of racial or cultural biases. Hopefully the assessments that are being used have been vetted and we will not have this issue, but it has been an issue in the past. So they also need to be valid and reliable. And so I want you to ask yourself, why are validity and reliability so important when doing the assessment of a child? And what I would encourage you to do right now is to press pause on my lecture and to watch this video that describes reliability and validity.
Hello.
So when we're looking at validity, it's the extent to which an instrument is measuring what it's supposed to measure. So in other words, is it doing what it's supposed to do? It's the most essential quality needed in measuring an instrument. So the greater the validity of a test, the greater our confidence that it measures what it's designed to measure. We can look specifically at criterion-related validity, which is a method for assessing the validity of an instrument by comparing its scores with another criterion. Okay, and so with this, we're looking at coefficients and correlations. There's two types of criterion-related validity. So the first one is concurrent, and that occurs when the criterion measures are obtained at the same time as the test scores. So I have an example here, and that is a test that measures levels of depression. Also, we look at predictive validity, which occurs when the criterion measures are obtained at a time after the test. So an example would be career and aptitude test. Content validity is whether the individual items on a test represent what you actually want to assess, so that's important. So we can ask ourselves, does the content of our measure fairly and accurately reflect the content desired to be measured? So these are all really important things because we want to make sure we have a purpose in giving these types of assessments and that they're going to give us valuable information. Construct validity is the extent to which a test measures a theoretical construct or attribute. And a construct is an attribute, proficiency, ability, or skill that happens in the human brain and is defined by established theories. So overall, we have different factors that affect validity, and those are test-related factors. The criterion to which you compare your instrument may not be well enough established, intervening events, and reliability. So we're going to come to our first activity. So I'm going to talk you through it and ask you to pause the presentation and complete this. So I know in a class before we've talked about What Works Clearinghouse. The website is here. This website helps educators to select evidence-based programs. So what you're going to do with a partner, or you can do this alone if you'd like, is you're going to go to that website that I just referenced. You're going to choose a topic and a grade on the home page. Then you're going to choose an effective program. So as you're looking through that list of programs, you want to make sure you're clicking on a program that's evidence-based. So if it says uncertain effects, you should not select that program. Then on the top right, you're going to see some different PDFs. So you're going to view the brief PDF and the intervention report. Also on that home page, you'll see some generic information that's really helpful. So you're going to convey the information and findings on the Jamboard. So I have provided an example of what would be appropriate for you. So the link to the Jamboard is here. And please make sure you include your name, and if you're working with a partner, your partner's name. That way you can get your participation points for today. So go ahead and press pause and start on this activity. So we've learned about validity, and we're going to shift to reliability. When we look at reliability, we're talking about consistency of measurements. So if a test lacks reliability, it is not stable, reproducible, dependable, meaningful, or accurate. So we can ask ourselves, well, how do we account for an individual who does not get exactly the same test score every time he or she takes the test? So when we're looking at that, well, we all have different psychological states, and those can vary from day to day. We can look at environmental factors that are going on, the test form that was given each time, and then is there multiple raters that are scoring the test? So there's different types of reliability, and I'm going to go over two of them, and then we're going to spend some time doing an activity on the third one. So the first one is test-retest reliability, and that's when subjects tend to obtain the same score when tested at different times. So it's measured by administering a test twice at two different points in time. So then we have the split half reliability, and that's when subjects score on some trials consistently and they match their scores on other trials. So it involves correlations, so correlating two halves of the same test. If those halves of the test provide similar results, then that is going to suggest internal consistency, and it's going to be reliable. So what we're going to spend some time on is inter-rater reliability. So we are going to do part one of this project, which is this assignment, which is an assignment for my class. And then when we come back next week in person, I'll walk you through the second part, which is IRR, inter-rater reliability. So this essentially is pretty popular with behavior assessments, but it's when you have two raters independently observe and record specified behaviors during the same time period. So when you're doing this, you have a target behavior, and that's that specific behavior the observer is looking to record. So perhaps it's the number of times a student's disruptive, or amount of time spent off task, or how long a temper tantrum is. So you have a target behavior you're looking at. So the formula for IRR is the number of agreements divided by the number of agreements plus disagreements times 100, and that's going to give you a percentage of agreement. And I'm going to help you with that next class, but we have to complete an activity initially to begin with. So it's and excuse me, I forgot to mention on the slide before, but I would encourage you to press pause and watch that video on IRR. So this is really important, and I need everybody to zone in and listen to this. For this first part, it's essential that you work on this alone. You should not work on this with a partner, okay? It does not matter if you have different results from your partner. Everyone needs to do this independently for it to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to be working on a duration recording. So on Moodle, I have 3 different documents. So the first one is going to give you the instructions for duration recording, which I have here on this slide. So duration recording documents how long a student engages in a specified behavior. So this type of data collection is appropriate for behaviors that have a distinct beginning and ending, and for those that occur at a high rate, such as tantruming, being out of a seat, not completing a task. So to collect data on the duration of a behavior, what you're going to do is first you have to know, well, what am I looking for? So there is a target or a problem behavior, and so that behavior is listed here. And so essentially during independent math activities, Kaylin engages in off-task behaviors lasting more than 3 seconds. Okay, so when you look at that definition on your form, you want to make sure you read over the target or problem behavior so you know what you're watching for during the duration recording. So what you're going to do is I want you to read over the instruction sheet first, which is on Moodle. The second step is you're going to pull up the video of the child in the classroom. You're going to see on the video that there's a stopwatch. So whenever you see the child engaging in off-task behaviors, you're going to start the stopwatch. Whenever she begins working again, you'll stop it. And the reason for that is we are tracking the duration of off-task behaviors. So you should only be using the stopwatch while the child is off task. So as soon as she starts working, you're going to stop the stopwatch. Maybe she works for a few minutes and then she becomes off task again. Start the stopwatch again. So in this way, you're going to be recording the length of time the behavior occurred. You will repeat those steps. So start, stop every time she is engaging in off-task behavior. You're going to repeat those until the observation period is over. Then you're going to calculate the total duration by adding the duration of each episode during the observation period. So what you're going to see is on Moodle, there is a duration recording form that you're going to use, okay? You want to make sure that when you're adding them up at the end, that you're doing everything in seconds. So if you have any minutes, make sure you convert those to seconds. So try your best on this. We will be going over this at the beginning of class next week, and I want you to bring your completed form with you to class next week, okay? If you have questions about that, please email me or send me a Teams chat. So after you have finished that, I have 2 discussion questions I want you to answer on Flipgrid. The link is here. First, according to the duration data that you collected, what percentage of time was the student off task? And then number 2, do you think the percentage of time the student was engaged in off-task behavior is problematic? And explain. So moving on with other measures of reliability is alternative forms. These measures of reliability are obtained by administering different versions of an assessment tool to the same group of individuals. We can also look at SEM, which is standard error of measurement, and that's the amount of error that exists when using a specific instrument. And then we can overall look at the factors that affect reliability, which is how long is the test, the test-retest interval, the variability of scores, has the child been guessing, and then the variation within the test situation. So that 4th criterion is that it is administered by trained personnel. So this is really important. We want people giving the assessments who are trained and know what they're doing. So they're trained in assessments. They abide by instructions of the assessments. So thinking about the protocol book. And then they understand that we have this standardization. So we have the standard way of structuring the test materials, of administering the procedures, of the scoring, and the techniques for interpreting results. The 5th criterion is that no single procedure can be used as the sole criterion. So like we've said, we need multiple sources of data for an evaluation. So the goal of the comprehensive evaluation is to measure students' current levels, find their strengths and weaknesses so we can report those to the parent, collect and organize information that the IEP team can use. So essentially, all of the information that's being collected during the evaluation is going to help inform the initial IEP. It's going to help us set goals. It's going to help us know what special ed services the child needs. So other areas that can be assessed throughout this evaluation process are health, vision, hearing, social and emotional status, general intelligence, academic performance, communication status, and motor abilities. So overall, there are 3 conditions. Number 1, that we're using a variety of assessment tools and strategies. Number 2, we're not using any single measure alone. And number 3, that we're using sound instruments that are valid and reliable. Okay. So that brings me to our last slide. So as a reminder, please bring with you the class duration recording document. This is the document that you completed in class today. When we come back to class next week, we will complete IRR in class. Please make sure you read chapters 16 through 18 in the special ed textbook. That's really going to help you with your final exam in this class. And please make sure you bring your textbook with you to every single class from now until the end of the semester. Thank you.